people, regular folk, are creating groups because there's no other means.
Yeah.
Do you think that's happening as well, Andy?
Oh, 100%. I mean, there's no, like, I work for the NHS in mental health services now, and there's nothing really like out there in terms of government supported. Like, to get into mental health services is to fight, and you've got to be really, really poorly to be able to get the NHS services. And most of what's available is charities like Mind, or there's Andy's Man Club and things like that. And I mean, that's all run by experts by experience, isn't it? People who've lived it themselves, and then they're giving back to mental health services by supporting other people who need help. And I think that's like the majority of the support that's out there is that kind of like out of practical support. It's a bit of a mess, really, to be honest, and I can't see how it's going to get any better.
Well, I'd love to talk about this as we go on through this
Yeah,
conversation as well, because this is lovely to know, and it'll be lovely to hear your journey and how you got to where you are now as well. So let's start from the beginning, Andy. So where were you born? Where are you from?
So I'm from Middlesbrough. I've lived in this area all of my life. Coming up 40 this year, so, and I've stuck around this area all my life.
Are you close to where you were brought up with your parents? And
Well, at the moment I'm living with my parents again temporarily, and they live quite close to here, like a couple of miles, not too far.
what was your childhood like? Let's explain your childhood.
Um, like fairly typical. My biological parents are still together. It's always been like a relatively happy family life, and your bits of conflict, arguing between parents, but nothing far beyond, I think, what most people experience.
You got any
I
brothers or
think
sisters?
I've got a half sister. She's 12 years older than me, so it was kind of not a typical sibling relationship, kind of more like another parent almost in a way. We're quite close, and I've got nieces who are like grown up as well now. One in their 20s and one just finishing school.
So did your mum marry another
My mum had a
man as well?
previous relationship before my dad, and that's my sister's dad, but she calls my dad dad as well. Like that, she's got a closer relationship with my dad, who's her stepdad, than what she does with her own dad.
I suppose it just comes from like you know who you're around and who's in the house, and it's relationships, isn't it? I think that's how that sort of thing works. Because you could have a cousin who you've never seen, you could have a brother who you don't really talk to, but
Yeah.
really, I think family is about how close you are to the people around you.
Yeah, and I think that I mean, I don't think that I have probably a typically close family relationship, but maybe part of that is because I've got autism, and maybe it's just the way some of my relationships are with people. I did have quite a lot of conflict with my parents as I got older, but a lot of that was to do with the way that I leaned on alcohol and cocaine to get through my like early adult life. I think caused a lot of problems, and like as I've got older, and I've looked at like my wider family as well. There's a lot of like neurodiversity within my family that I didn't see until I had a better understanding of autism and ADHD as I became a mental health nurse and as I got diagnosed with autism myself.
I think there's a massive pattern in people as well, especially now, because there's been a massive shift change in cultures as well as how we look at the world and how we talk to each other. For instance, I mean, an example from my background, it's something you didn't talk about and wasn't really talked about as well, and it wasn't openly discussed. Whereas now you talk like this with your kids, and you're always open and trying to find like, is there an issue? Is there not? But we'll have an open conversation about these things. Was that something that you grew up with, Andy, as well? Just like you've got some issues, but nobody mentioned them, or were they just like he's just one of those? He's got a few things. He's a quirk as a kid, or something like that. You
I
know?
think there was like always like there was people that were quirky in your family, but it was never that you would never have thought, oh, they've got autism, they've got ADHD, they've got this or that mental health problem. Or, I mean, I don't think I even really knew myself that mental health was a thing until I was deep into experiencing my own problems as I got older, and I was probably like late 20s by that point. It never really like occurred to me that mental health was a thing before then.
So let's talk about as a kid, because clearly there must have been signs of this when you were younger. What were you like as a kid? let's go over to school. Did you have lots of friends? Did you get on with people? What was it like?
Yeah, so I mean, like I've mentioned already that I have autism, and I don't think that it's the typical idea of what you think of, like the communication problems with autism. Mine's probably more that I don't know when to stop talking, and I don't know what I can't recognise when I'm oversharing and things like that. So I always had friends, but I always didn't quite fit in the same as everyone else did, and I always had this feeling that like so and so is my best friend, but I'm not their best friend, and like often thought like, why haven't I got someone who treats me as if I'm their best friend? And I don't think it ever really bothered me to a massive degree, but the thought was always there a little bit that that I wasn't quite the same as everyone else. And whenever I had an interest, I took it to a ridiculous degree. Like I would get into The Simpsons, and I like wrote my own book about The Simpsons when I was about 10. It was like there was never like any sort of like just enjoying things in a normal way.
So you didn't kind of follow other kids. Did you stick to what you wanted to do a lot? Were you just like, when you've got like your blinkers on kind of thing? Were you like that as a kid?
I think I always always was like conscious that I wanted other people to like me, and I think I would do things as a child to conform to what other people thought I should be doing.
Was that with
And
family as well?
it became more difficult as I got older, I think, because like when you were playing sports at school and stuff, I was like overly sensitive to the idea that I would disappoint people when I was playing. So like if you play football and you misplace a pass and people are like shouting at you like, what are you doing, man? I just decided I wouldn't play anymore. So I would like, it'd get to PE lessons in school and I'd just stand at the side and refuse to play because I couldn't cope with the idea that I would disappoint people.
So was that with family as well? Because I know sometimes it's you kind of you want to fit in with friends groups, and family you tend to push back a little bit, or would you try and fit in with family and just sort of go along with what they wanted to do?
I think like at home on my own, like with my close family, I kept myself to myself quite a lot, like doing things on my own, playing. I played with toys until I was about 15, like wrestling figures and things like that, and so I'd be like sat in my room playing on my own a lot, and I don't really think that I did like feel a need to try and fit in with them. I have always felt like at home though a bit different to everyone else within my family as well.
Did that? Do you feel like you were isolated, or do you feel like you just wanted to play by yourself?
I think I just preferred to get on with what I wanted to get on with. I don't think it was like that I didn't want to be with people or that they didn't want me with them. I think it was just that I would do what I wanted to do and I was happy enough doing that.
So it just didn't bother you?
Not really, no. I
So
think as I've got older, I've got more conscious of the fact that there's, like my sister's closer to my mum than what I am. And I don't think it's so much that it bothers me, but I just sometimes feel the need to comment on it now and I can't keep it in sometimes. And then that causes its own conflict. And yeah, I know I don't like, it's not something that like upsets me.
yeah, are you more aware of it now?
Oh yeah, I've definitely like, as the years have gone on, I've got a lot more self-awareness, and maybe part of that's just because of knowing the issues that I've got, the autism and I've got PTSD as well. But yeah, just having, and I suppose maybe I overanalyze things because of my work as a mental health nurse as well. I probably look into things a bit more than what I need to sometimes.
Well, if you wrote your own book about The Simpsons, I think you might have that kind of trait in you as well.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I know it's like it's been the same with Strongman, where like it's like consumes me when I'm interested in something. Like I can't get enough of it. Like I'll wake up and I'll be checking what's going on Strongman social media, and I organise competitions, and yeah, like it's gone. I mean, I've coached people for free and things just to be able to like be more involved in that community.
So you get obsessed, really, don't you?
Oh, absolutely, 100%.
But do you get obsessed, but do you move on quickly from it and find another obsession? Does one replace the other?
No, it's been like the ones that I've had have gone on for a long time. So like the Strongman now has been there for, I mean, I've always been interested in it since I was a kid, but since I started going to the gym in my late 20s, and I'm coming up 40 now, and it's been an obsession throughout my 30s. I've competed since 2015, and throughout that whole time, it's been something it's just constant.
So as a kid, teenage years, any bullying, just normal, anything kind of jump out at you at that time?
Yeah,
Looking back, because I know you reflect quite a lot on what you like when you were young and now. So is there anything that does stand out? You
I
know?
think there was a bit of bullying. Like I was I never like I said, that feeling that you don't fit in properly. I think like I didn't have the best clothes when I was a kid, and I was aware that like people were saying, "Oh, like you've got this shit make on, and we've all got Adidas and Nike on, and why?" And then as I got a bit older, it was like I was overweight from being in primary school, and there was always comments about my weight, my appearance, my haircut, and stuff like that. But like, I think it did bother me. That was it was hard to deal with. But I think there's people who have it worse. Like I wasn't like physically, you know, like getting beaten up at school or having my lunch money taken off me and things like that. I still always had like friends. I got on with most people, and I think that a lot of them probably thought it was like banter, but I wasn't seeing it as banter.
Yeah, sometimes that flippant comment can hurt you and last
Oh yeah,
a lifetime, can't it? So
yeah, and it was always the ones about my weight that bothered me. That like, so, you know, commenting that you've got tits and stuff like that. Do you know what I mean? Like, and I don't know why I had like always tried occasionally to do things about my weight, but it never really stuck until I found weight training really.
did it bother you being overweight?
It did, but I just don't think I knew how to do anything about it.
Education.
I don't think people were educated very well in the 90s about how to lose weight, and you'd heard of like Weight Watchers and things like that, but I don't think I'd heard of the idea of counting calories. I don't think I even probably put two and two together with the fact that exercising and eating less would make me lose weight.
Were you good at sports? Was it sports something that you
No,
did as a kid?
I was terrible at sport. Like my coordination's not great, but the sports that I actually did better at were things like I did trampolining to quite a reasonable level when I was in primary school, but then I gave that up because it got to a point where I would have had to go up to Newcastle to have lessons because I'd progressed beyond what the instructors where I was training were able to teach. But team sports I've always hated. Like I loved watching football as a kid. I used to have a season ticket to the Borough, but I wouldn't play football, and certainly not in an organised manner. Like at school, I would just stand on the side and refuse to participate because of that feeling that I'm going to do something wrong. People are going to criticise me. I'd rather be criticised for not playing at all than criticised for, you know, causing someone to score a goal against you or missing a pass or whatever. I couldn't get away with rugby, which they tried to push on us because I went to school in North Yorkshire. They were like big on rugby there, but I didn't like the feeling of getting dirty. So I couldn't stand being tackled because I didn't want to get mud on me. So it was like sports were never. I'd play like a daft kickabout with my mates outside of school, but I was never into organised sports.
That's interesting. That's really interesting because I just wondered if the lack of wanting to participate in football was there anything else in your life that mental kind of state would affect, like not being a part of stuff? Were you comfortable around groups and stuff like that? Was that a problem for you, Andy?
Yeah, like I always had. Like I kind of like floated between different friend groups in school, and I always had mates outside of school, and we would go and like ride our bikes, and we would play like daft games of football and stuff like that, and I always had people that I had like connections with over. Like I had a few friends who were really into wrestling, so we would like get together and watch whatever WrestleMania or whatever had been on at the time and stuff like that. So I think I always had like connections with other people. It just wasn't team sports.
Yeah, but you're not actually doing wrestling. You couldn't.
No, I did flirt with the idea at some point, but it's a bit harder to find somewhere to learn to wrestle than what it is to find a gym or something like that. I still watch it now. I've been watching it this morning, in fact.
So later teenage years, what was it like? Let's go into more the development. Did you get into the partying side, or did the gym come first? Which came first?
Oh, the gym wasn't until much later. So, like, I started going out probably a little bit later than some of my friends. I was probably 17, coming up 18 when I started drinking properly. And I think I found quite quickly that anxieties that I didn't even realise that I had before would go away when I started to drink.
You mentioned drinking properly.
Or like you'd have an odd beer when you were with your family and stuff like that, or you would, you'd have one now and again. But then I would start going out, and I think from immediately until I start, like, so as soon as I started going out, it'd be that I'd get hammered every time.
Was
Like,
that to get out of your own way? Was it kind of ease a little bit of you, or get comfortable? What was that?
I think there was a part of that I didn't know when to stop. And I think there's a cultural thing, isn't there, of that people think that you should get smashed. And I think that's starting to go away now. And like culturally, people are not doing it as much. But there was certainly an idea 20 years ago that you drank until you were sick. And I think that I enjoyed it. And then I didn't like, I don't think I knew when to stop. Oh,
Becomes a rite of passage, doesn't it?
yeah.
Who can get the most drunk?
But then I think, it was always me that got the most drunk. And I always did it more than everyone else because I would go out 6 nights a week.
And what age was this? 18, was it?
From being about, so when I started uni the first time, I moved in with some of my friends and we started home brewing so that we could drink more for less money. And we were all as bad as each other in terms of that we would drink as much as we could physically get in our bodies. We were all barred out of half the pubs in Middlesbrough for the states that we would get in.
What, just being rowdy? Were you fighting? Were you rowdy or what?
Not really. Well, like rowdy, but not rowdy as in aggressive, just like as in couldn't control the state that I was in because I was so drunk all the time. I would get myself in trouble, but not, again, not in terms of like fighting and stuff, just that people couldn't stand the way I behaved because I was so drunk all the time. And it would have to be, I would try and get as drunk as I could as quickly as possible. I'd be drinking like bottles of wine to do it cheaper than bottles of cider or the home brewing and stuff like that. And then there was a point where I could hardly go anywhere in Middlesbrough because I was barred out of everywhere.
Was the police involved or?
I mean, there was times where the police brought me home, but no, I was never never arrested for like drunken disorderly or anything like that. There was times where like I wasn't, not that I'd refused to pay for taxis, I wasn't capable of paying for them, and then the taxis would get the police involved and things like that. And I'm surprised that I didn't get in more trouble, to be honest.
What were your parents saying at this time?
They were in an absolute state over it. My dad worked away a lot, so it caused a lot of conflict between me and my mum. And she's got problems with like anxiety and things like that, and I definitely think that for a while I made it a lot worse.
Yeah, well, I suppose you're just being a teenager, exploring, aren't you? So.
But yeah, it went on well beyond being a teenager, though. That was the problem. It didn't really stop until I was nearly 30.
Really?
Yeah, and throughout that whole time I was drinking and taking cocaine like 5 nights a week. So the cocaine didn't come in until I was about 22 or 23.
I was going to say, what's the shift from the beer to the drugs?
I think I found that when I was introduced to cocaine, that kept me on a bit more of an even keel if I was drinking. That I think it calmed my head down a bit and it gave me a confidence that I'd never really had. And I enjoyed the feeling far too much, and I could function during the day without it, but the idea of going on a night out and not having it just didn't interest me. So if it wasn't available, I wouldn't go out.
So you're finding you were thinking about it during the day as well?
I would be planning my next night out. Yeah. That was all I lived for. Really, was to go out and get drunk and sniff a bag every night.
And what were you doing at work? Were you working at the time? Or?
I worked in Tesco at the time. I was full-time supervisor in Tesco. I left uni to take a full-time job because I hated uni the first time around. So I was on like a full-time wage while living with my parents. So I had like a huge disposable income, and it all went on alcohol and cocaine. Every last bit of it. Did
you just fob uni off because it just wasn't interesting? You wanted more money?
Yeah, I stopped going. I was doing like an IT course. It was creative multimedia, so it was all like Photoshop and that sort of like creative side of it. And it just wasn't interesting me, so I started picking more shifts up at work. It was probably Safeway at the time. It was that long ago. And then I think it was picking up more shifts so I could afford to go out more probably. And then I was too hungover to go to the lectures, and they didn't interest me anyway, so it was always that I would pick to stay in bed hungover or go to work rather than go to uni. And then I remember going in about halfway through second year. I hadn't been to uni for about 3 months, and they started talking about the work that was due in the next day, and I just went, oh, I've fucked this up now, I've got to go. So I quit the course the next day and went full time in the supermarket.
So you could actually manage doing this just like during the week work and then weekend binges, or
No, I was going out after work and then going back into work the next day.
really you can manage that?
Yeah. I just wouldn't do very much at work a lot of the time. I'd get other people to do my jobs for me while I sat down and did next to fuck all. But I think when you're younger, you can... Maybe I didn't sober up. I don't really know how I managed it so much now. The thought of it now, like I couldn't possibly cope with going to work the next day after I would go out and I'd probably have had 12 pints and a gram of coke every night. I don't know how I did it.
Any health issues from that kind of at
Just
the
my-
time or not?
Just my weight, really. But I did go through a period where I lost quite a lot of weight intentionally by doing, like, it was probably Atkins at the time, where people are doing the like caveman diets and things like that, carnivore and whatnot. Now, I think it was probably Atkins when I did it and lost like a lot of weight through that. And I was like conscious of what I would drink, but I was still drinking a lot. So I'd go out and drink spirits instead of drinking pints to try and lose weight. But there was never like any, I've always had, so there's obviously a thought now that with having a heart problem now, that all the cocaine that I did throughout my 20s have probably done something.
And do you regret this as well, Andy? Because some people look back and they kind of, do you regret it, or were they just good times that you had when you were young?
Oh, I mean, yeah, I try not to think about regrets in terms of like, would I change things? Because you have that like butterfly effect, don't you? If I did something different now, what would be different at present? And as much as I would like to not have heart failure, but which the cardiologist doesn't think is because of the cocaine use anyway, I wouldn't like to think that I would go back and change something, because who knows where I would be now.
So when did all of this kind of come to an end? Because you said you'd done it for quite a long time, up until 30.
So it got worse in my late 20s. I was in a really abusive relationship where I was like emotionally and physically abused really badly.
So you had a relationship going through all of this? Is it just...
She was as bad with the drink and cocaine as what I was.
So you're like a duo, so was this partnership coming together because of the lifestyle?
Yeah, we knew each other from going out drinking. We'd met over the years on nights out and things like that, and then we ended up, when I must have been like in my late 27, 28, something like that, we started dating, and I think, yeah, the relationship like kind of fell together because we had a shared interest in drink and drugs, and like we had similar interest in music and things like that as well. But I think it became like the problems with the cocaine became a lot worse because she would encourage me to do it more, and all the friends that were around us were doing it a lot. I mean, Middlesbrough's got the lowest price cocaine in Europe, so it's just easy. It's easy for people here to do it. It's cheaper to have a line than it is to have a pint here.
Really?
Yeah, cheapest coke and the cheapest heroin in Europe.
And I mean,
fortunately, I never got into the heroin, but yeah, it's a horrendous problem in this area for a lot of young people because of how cheap it is.
and is it easy to get as well?
Oh, sometimes you can't go out without being offered it.
So even like 12 years ago, is it the same thing now?
I don't really go out enough now to know what it would be. Like, when I go in a pub now, I don't really get offered it, but I would imagine in a nightclub, it would still be just as easy as it was then. Everyone would be offer you, if they didn't offer you coke, they'd offer you a pill.
So the relationship met at 28, was it going well? Was it just a lifestyle thing? You kind of, you found each other similar interests and stuff?
It was like I'd never really had a proper relationship until that point. And I think that I became very dependent on her very quickly because I was so like happy that someone wanted me, you know what I mean? And then it didn't take long before she started like the emotional abuse, commenting on my weight. She'd come in from like, she'd go out with her friends and come back and be like, oh, this lad's been talking to me, this lad's given me his number, he's better looking than you, I could pull this lad if I wanted. And just starting to, like pick away at your self-esteem. And
how far into the relationship was this, Andy? Did it start straight away, or was it kind of...
It's quite hard. I would say it was maybe probably from about 4 or 5 months in, or something like that. And I think I found it quite hard to recognise that it was something that shouldn't be happening. And I didn't really talk to anyone about it initially And it wasn't, no one else really noticed it until she started controlling my social life. And then when she started hitting me after that and people would see the bruises and stuff, then people would comment. But it was too far gone by that point where I was so sucked into this relationship and she was blaming it on her mental health that I couldn't really get myself out of it.
Do you think that was a struggle because of, obviously you mentioned the low self-esteem in your first relationship, and you really want to kind of keep this thing going because this is the first one you've had?
I think it was like a bit of that. I think obviously like with the autism as well, like a difficulty in understanding the relationships between people, and then she would blame what she was doing on her mental health. She was like abused as a kid, she had a diagnosis of a personality disorder, and she would say like, oh, I can't help acting like this because of my mental health condition, and I didn't know any different because I didn't even, this was the point where I started to think what is mental health and do my own bits of research about what does this condition mean that she's telling me that she's got. And like even with that though, I think I just accepted if she's telling me that this is happening because of her condition, that must be true. And on reflection now, I know different. But at that time, you're seeing someone with like the rose tinted glasses on you, and you accept their word to be gospel because you want it to be true, don't you? Because of the way you feel about them at the time.
Yeah, because you can get kind of a little blinkered about
Oh, definitely, yeah.
people's personality because you really want this to work, and if someone's the first time someone's ever paid your attention in that frame of mind with a relationship, I find that there's a common thing as well of sort of acceptance from older people. You think everybody else knows more than you. Was that a thing as well? Is this kind of, is there sort of similarities with people in relationships, Andy, or not?
I think like, no, do you know what? I don't think I really knew how a relationship was supposed to be. And when she started saying like the nasty comments and stuff to me initially, I don't think I really knew that was that wrong. And then when the physical abuse started, it was always when she'd had a drink. And I think I would just accept that it was because she was drinking too much, but she wouldn't stop.
So she was verbally abusing you like without the drink. It was like a normal. Did it start
It was
like small
it
and
was
stuff?
it was mainly always when she'd had a drink. She'd become nasty, and it'd be quite personal attacks about my weight and my looks, and a lot of comments about, oh, so and so's better looking than you, and I'd rather shag your friend than I would you, and
Yeah, because she knows it's going to trigger you.
yeah, and I think I think she probably knew that it would be a way of like, you know, breaking down my self-confidence, and like reels you in a bit more then, doesn't it?
I just always wonder, like, why do people stay if she feels this? Why didn't she just move on? And kind of, was she cheating? Did she cheat behind your back or anything like
Yeah, quite a bit, yeah. She was like, and the way it was done was like, so she was sleeping with someone she worked with, and then she would take me with her on staff nights out, and without me knowing that she was like sleeping with these people behind my back, and I'd get friendly with them, and then she'd tell me after, oh, by the way, I was sleeping with so and so, and
when you were seeing her?
like while we were still together, yeah. So,
So
but
she
then
did
she would
this when
blame
you
it on her mental health condition, or she would blame it on me, or you should say I'm only doing it because I'm not getting whatever off you, I'm not satisfied by you, or she would say it was because she was drunk, or and like I think that my self-esteem was so low by that point that I did blame it on myself, or that I accepted in part that it was because of the mental health condition that she had, or I just don't think I knew. Don't think I knew how to get out of it either, because I was worried that she would do something to herself if the relationship ended. Because there was like sometimes threats about that she would hurt herself or end her life if we split up.
So you felt trapped?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. Yeah. And as time went on, it got worse and worse and worse. And I think, you know, like the violence got more severe. And she would tell me stories about, oh, in my previous relationship, my ex, he was abusive to me and I had a restraining order against him and stuff. And as it transpired, I met the guy later on, and it was that he had a restraining order against her and she'd been violent to him. And she was like spinning them stories round to make herself sound more hard done by. And like the violence got worse. And I mean, it's one of them, isn't it? People always say like, you never hit a woman. but you don't know what you'd do when you're backed into a corner and someone's like raining down punches on you. And like there was times where I would push her off me. There was one occasion where I did hit her back once, and like things like that I regret. Like, but you don't know how would you have done it differently? So she wasn't weak, she wasn't small. And what do you do when you're backed into a corner? But then when them things are happening, you also, how do you talk to people about it? Because everyone's always told you never hit a woman.
Yeah.
But they never told you that a woman was going to hit you.
Yeah, I mean, who do you go to talk about that?
There's no one, is there? And I mean, even my friends would see me come into work and I'd have a black eye or I'd have a bust nose and stuff like that, and they would like, you could tell that they know what's happened, but no one really talks to you about it. And I think people have enough difficulty with how do you address when you see that a woman's injured by domestic violence, and then when you see it's happening to a man, I think people don't have a clue where to even start with it. And there was a few of my friends acknowledged, like, she's controlling your social life. She could see that some people knew that what she was doing was wrong, and then she would try and isolate me from them, but then they try to address it in ways that, I mean, I didn't expect that they would know what to do, but they would, like, one of my friends put a status on Facebook about it, and that just made things 10 times worse. But what is the right thing to do? I don't really know. Like, even now, it's hard, isn't it? I think a quiet conversation about it probably would have been better than putting a status on Facebook. But
yeah, because obviously somebody wants to call her out on her stuff, and then hopefully that's the trigger that's going to sort this out. But you're on the inside.
Yeah, and it just isolated me from that friendship group more. And that group of friendships, it never really recovered after that. It was hard to ever, like, become, even after the relationship ended, become friends with them again, really.
And I know this question is going to be one of those questions that people have asked you a million times. Why didn't you leave?
I loved her, I think, at the time, or I thought I did. I don't. I mean, we lived together. You'd get up the next morning and she'd apologise profusely, or she'd blame it on me, and I would accept the blame. And it'd be, the blame for stuff would be ridiculous. Like, I'd be ringing her, why aren't you in from work yet? I've cooked your tea. And then that'd be my fault for harassing her. When actually I was, like, you know, trying to do nice things and have a nice relationship. I mean, I remember, I think it was like 2-year anniversary, I'd cooked her tea and stuff, and she just didn't come home from work. And then when she did come in, she'd been out on a date with someone else. And then when I started getting angry about it, as you would. And then that was my fault for being angry.
Did you know she'd been out on a date, or she
told me as soon as she got in, yeah. And I think she did it wanting a reaction.
I just wonder what that is. Is that just pure attention? What is it?
I don't know. I think some people, like, thrive on conflict because it's all they've ever known.
I think she must have fed off, you know, the conflict, and
maybe she was pushing the boundary of what she could get away with. I don't know. It's hard to know, really.
So what were you feeling at this time? Man, this is happening. Clearly, your self-esteem is going to be going down and down and down and down and down.
Yeah. I think I just lent on the drink and the drugs quite a lot. And then she left her job because I said to her, if you can't stop yourself from sleeping with your co-workers and the customers coming into the pub that she was working in, then you need to think about working somewhere else. And she came home the next day and said, oh, I've quit my job, like, as if she thought I'd be excited by it. And obviously, like, that left me with all the bills to pay. And I ended up, like, stealing and all sorts to try and paper over the cracks of that and afford all of the lifestyle that was going on with both of us, using cocaine several times a week and paying for a house. And it was quite a dark time mentally then. But I don't think that I was able to acknowledge at that time that I was having a mental health problem, because I didn't really understand it. And when I started trying to understand mental health better, she discouraged me from doing that research. And I talked at that point about going to uni and learning to be a mental health nurse, and she, like, really, really discouraged me from doing it. And I think that was because she knew that she would get found out, and that I would know that she couldn't use these excuses anymore about her, like, her mental health condition.
Yeah, plus she doesn't want to let you go because she's controlling your life.
Yeah.
And this is an avenue to your freedom for what you want. And she doesn't want you to have anything that you want.
Yeah.
And at what point did it get? I mean, what was the worst point in this? The violence.
I mean, it was happening like at least weekly at one point, and there was a stage we went through where I was having to call the police to get her removed from the house like quite regularly, like every couple of weeks. And like I would never press charges against her. I would just ask them to go and take her somewhere away from me to keep me safe. There was a couple of the two times, once where I pushed her off me and once where I hit her back. She called the police on me both times and I got arrested for both of them, because the police come in, you tell the story and they go, oh yeah, you're twice the size of her, we don't believe that she's the aggressor. And you go and spend the night in the cells, and then there's no case to answer and you get let out. But it doesn't take away the fact that you've had to spend the night in the cells for keeping yourself safe.
So your respite is you being arrested, isn't it? From that?
Yeah, in a fashion, yeah. There was times where they just take, like, I think once or twice the police come and took me to my mum and dad's, or most of the time it was that she would get took away because they could see that they'd often turn up and she was still like, I'd have barricaded myself in the spare room and she was trying to smash the door in to get to me. It was that bad. And they would hear it on the phone and they would see it when they got there. So like there wasn't an issue with me trying to convince them at that point that she was the aggressor because they could see it.
I was going to say, it's got to be, they've have got to know at some point that it's not all your fault. This is not you, this is her. This is flipped. And especially if you've got bruises and if you've got bust noses and stuff like that and black eyes.
Yeah, but I would just refuse to give a statement most of the time. All I wanted was for it to stop. I didn't want them to arrest her or for them to prosecute her, or you would worry that it would make things worse because, you know, a lot of the time people are not going to go to jail for it. You don't know what they're going to do to you if they start getting in trouble. And for me, it was enough that they took her away and I could be safe. And then the next day she would come crying and I would take her back. And
so obviously if this has happened quite a lot, was any of the police kind of saying, look, we know this is a problem? Anyone like just take you aside going, look, you need to kind of sort this out, or you need to do something about it, or we're going to get you help? Nothing like that?
My experience with the police was really negative. Like I don't think that as a male victim that you, or then, this is obviously going back a long time now, I don't think I was treated very well. I don't think they really acknowledged like how the lack of safety that I had at that point, like the threat that I was under. I don't remember ever really having a particularly positive experience with them.
Is this like early 2000s, Andy?
No, a bit later than that, about 2012.
2012. Okay. Doesn't seem that long ago, really, does it? Not to us. But...
No, but I think there's a lot of change has gone on in that time, hasn't there? A lot of the way that people look at domestic violence and about the way that men's mental health's affected by all sorts of things has changed in the last 10 years, hasn't it?
It's creeping, but it's taken a lot of effort from
Yeah.
people like yourself and men's mental health groups.
Yeah.
Not funded groups, but groups that have opened by themselves to make something happen because nothing's happening. So
Yeah.
I think there's quite a similar trait in all of these mental health groups that I've found, is they're opening them because nothing's being done. Do you think that's true?
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's strange when you look at mental health and you look at physical health, and people with physical health problems are not relying on groups run out of a church hall to deal with their physical problems, whereas mental health, you go into Andy's Man Club in a social club room and things like that, aren't you? And a lot of it is charity funded, and it does seem a bit of like a disconnect between physical and mental health.
Why is that?
I mean, it takes time to establish things like that, doesn't it? Like, I mean, mental health's obviously always existed, and people will say to you now with things like ADHD and autism, oh, that didn't exist 20 years ago. Well, of course it's always existed, but it takes a long time to acknowledge things, and then to build the infrastructure that's required to support it takes a lot. But I think the way things are now in the National Health Service, there's not really any scope to be able to increase services. Because no one wants to be a nurse or a healthcare assistant or anything like that, because the pay is terrible and the working conditions are terrible. And like, I think I've only worked in mental health for 8 years and things are constantly getting worse, not better. Because they can't, even if they put more funding into it and put more jobs out, there's no one to apply for them. No one wants to be a nurse.
And that's pretty much partly because of the pay.
Oh yeah, like almost exclusively because of the pay. I went from, when I qualified as a nurse, my pay went down from working in a supermarket to being a nurse.
Really?
Yeah. only briefly, but it did go down very slightly. Yeah, I was, and you're better off while you're training as a nurse. You get more money while you're training than you do when you qualify because of the discounts you get on council tax. You don't, like, you get a bursary, you get the student, like, I'm including getting a student loan and things like that. So it's like, it's borrowed money, isn't it? But
yeah, because they're
it does
encouraging
feel
you
like
to do the job, aren't they? But,
yeah, the
but when you
incentives that are there.
yeah.
But it's still not enough to make people want to do it at the moment.
Is it going to change?
I mean, I don't think it is, because I don't think that the government's got the desire to improve NHS services, and the shipping in nurses that they can pay at the current rate by, you know, getting people from Africa and Asia to come and do the jobs, and some of them are good at it and some of them are not.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a cultural thing as well, isn't it? I mean, understanding our drinking culture, you've got to have lived it, haven't you? I think, especially now. You know, we're sitting here talking about, you know, back in the day, and it was quite bad back in the day, but it was just a thing, wasn't it? You know,
Yeah.
with the drugs and the cocaine, like you mentioned, and you know, I don't know. It's the same as police. It takes some like understanding of where you're from and what the area is to actually get root to the problem. You know.
Yeah.
Find the issue and resolve the issue, but it's putting a band-aid on a broken leg, I think, all the time.
Yeah, definitely. And I think like that lived experience counts for so much. And you know, you recruit nurses from other parts of the world that don't have like the cultural experience to work in mental health. I think they do a lot better job in like general nursing and child nursing and things like that than what they can in mental health, because the cultural understanding of what goes on in mental health here, especially in a town with the issues that Middlesbrough's got. Like we've got the highest level of drug use in the UK, I think. But in a way, it's a positive because it puts so much money into that sector. We've got so much support for people with drug and alcohol problems, which I didn't realise at the time I had the problem. I suppose it probably would have been a good thing to know about then, but I also don't think I even recognised ever that I had a problem until I'd just stopped.
So the relationship, how did this end?
So there was a brief period we went through where we'd been on a night out once, we come home, and she had kicked off and assaulted me and whatever, and I just stormed out and left. And when I left, she packed her stuff and went and moved into the pub that she was working at and broke up with me, and we were split up for a little period. During that time, I slept with someone else and got them pregnant. Didn't know that had happened. Then we ended up getting back together, trying to make that relationship work, and I mean, it was worse than ever. That was then the period where the police were involved loads. The cocaine use was wildly out of control for both of us. And then I found out that I was going to be a dad, not to the person that I was in a relationship with. And it just clicked in my brain then, like, I've got a responsibility to this child that's coming, and I can't do that while I'm in a relationship where I'm getting battered. Even if she wanted to support me, and she did, like, I told her what was going on and that I was breaking up with her, and she begged me to stay with her and said, I'll raise the child with you. And I was just like, I appreciate the offer, but it's just not an environment you could possibly bring a child into. And she threw the coffee table at me and I left, and that was the end of it.
So there was a big bust up. So it's kind of happy. Going to say it, happy accident, really, Andy. That's kind of really helped you.
I think it saved one or both of us, really, because the way that relationship was going, I think either of us could probably have had a horrible accident at any time, the way we were going with the cocaine and drinking and stuff. And I, like, one regret, I always, like, I don't like to talk about regrets too much because you can't change the past, but the impact they had on her, like, I've been broke up with in that way, like, no matter what she did to me, like, you don't deserve to have someone come home one day and tell you that they're having a kid with someone else, and that obviously had a big toll on her. But, like, as far as I know, she recovered from that, and like, we're both alive to tell the tale.
So you felt a bit of guilt from that?
Oh, a lot, yeah.
Even after what you went through?
Yeah.
Is that just because of your nature? Andy, you kind of...
I think so. I think, yeah, probably. Yeah. I think it made me think more like, I wish I could have ended this earlier so that it didn't end up like that, because it's messy, isn't it?
It's messy, but it kind of helped you leave.
Yeah,
Do
it did.
you not
Yeah,
see it
yeah,
like that?
yeah.
I
And I
mean,
do think, like, I sometimes think now that, like, my daughter saved me, in a way.
and have you got like now? Are you with the person you've
No.
had the child with? You're not.
Nah, we tried, but it didn't work.
Okay.
And then then that went on to her, like, parental alienation, stopped me from seeing my daughter for a long time, which I think was a I don't know if I want to say too much about it, because we get on all right at the moment, but we were together for a little bit, we split up, I got in a new relationship, and then all hell broke loose. She stopped me from seeing my daughter, and that made me really, really mentally unwell. I was trying to kill myself and all sorts at that point, and I think that was, like, for me, like, I don't know if that was a loss of control, didn't know how to cope, didn't know what to do. There's no support there in that situation. I mean, you probably know loads of people, dads, who will say that they've had to go to court to see the kids, or they can't see the kids because they can't afford to go to court, and there's no support out there for that, or there's very little of it, and there's very little that you can do about it unless you've got the money to go to court. And I just didn't know what to do, and I was literally just, like, falling apart. Self-harming, overdoses, like,
Really?
messy. Yeah, really bad.
So how old was your daughter at this time? So how
She was
long have you
only-
been together in
Oh,
this
we
period?
were only together like a year or something,
Okay. But
like a little bit over a year, and then we split up, and I thought it was an amicable breakup, to be honest, to begin with, but she didn't see it the same as me, I don't think.
And did you go from that bad relationship into this one with
It's
your
not
new
the-
daughter?
Oh, right, yeah. So, yeah, I went from the abusive relationship into the relationship with my daughter's mum, but it was like, it was a relationship that we only got into because we had a kid. And, like, it wasn't a problematic relationship, but it just wasn't, like, much of a
Just didn't
relationship.
work.
We lived two separate lives, really, and it wasn't, like, something that, satisfied me.
But having your daughter, what does that mean to you?
Like, I never wanted kids, but I wouldn't change that I've got one. Obviously, you can imagine I said that I would. Like everything I do, I live my life for her now. Really, like, she's, like, the most important thing in the world.
Does it change your mindset?
Oh yeah, because literally from the day she was born, like, the drinking and the drugs stopped.
So that was the
Just, like,
catalyst, was it?
yeah. Even, like, not long after she was born, I stopped smoking as well, because of the thought of, I don't want her to grow up seeing me smoke.
So you're getting your act together, aren't you?
Oh yeah, I did, like, pretty much straight away, and applied to go to uni and study nursing, changed everything.
So you're kind of looking up here. This is when you're building yourself back up.
Yeah.
You mentioned PTSD as well.
Yeah, so that's from the domestic abuse. I was having flashbacks and nightmares, and the level of constant anxiety I was experiencing, like, if people approached me from behind or the side and stuff like that, I was just, like, on edge and jumping all the time. And
Was this straight away after that? And
no, do you know what?
Like
It wasn't really that much of a problem until when she stopped, like, my daughter's mum stopped me from seeing her, and I applied to go to court. A lot of it got brought up again then, because they obviously look at your police records and things like that, and they started talking about, you've got history with domestic violence, and they weren't that interested in the fact that almost every police involvement was with me as the victim. They just saw it as, you've been involved in domestic violence. So the court sent me to work with them as a perpetrator of domestic violence, and said I had to do the perpetrator's course. And then I went to them, they'd done the assessment, talked to me about all my experiences, and said, you're the victim, not the perpetrator, so you can't do this. So I went back to the court with that, and the court said, no, we don't agree. You've got to go and do that course. So I had to then go back to Harbour and kind of, like, ham up the idea that I'd been worse than I had, to get them to let me to do this course, or I wasn't allowed to see my daughter. And then it was the experience of going through this 6 months course, sat in a room full of people who were abusing their partners, talking about myself as if I was in the wrong, that I think kind of, like, I think it in a way like manifested ideas in my mind that I'd been worse than what I was, and that was when it all really got really, really bad, the PTSD stuff.
So you're...
Hold on a second, is that the right time?
It's 2 o'clock.
Okay. I can stay till about 2:45.
That's no problem. Yeah, no problem. So you've been put in a room with people who've been forced to go to meetings about domestic violence against their partner.
Most of them were sent there by social services because they weren't allowed to see the kids.
And you're the complete opposite, but you've got to sit in the room and listen to stories.
And the person that was leading the course, I was at the time doing my training to be a mental health nurse, and she worked at the Children's Mental Health Hospital in Middlesbrough as well, and I already knew her from that.
So what was the impact of that?
So well, it was very awkward.
So do you have to explain to her? Do you have to kind of pull her one side, or?
Yeah, took her to one side, and we didn't really like interact that much at work at the CAMS hospital where she worked as well. But it was awkward that. But there wasn't really anything I could do about it because nowhere else offered that course that the court said I had to do, and I just knew I needed to do it to be able to see my kid.
I mean, wow, that's amazing. That's so beyond anything that I thought would happen, and it's unbelievable that you had to do that. So that's kind of, did that trigger the PTSD? Yeah,
I think so. I think it was always there in the back of my mind, wasn't it? The experiences were there, but I think that like brought it to the forefront.
Because of their stories there, you're sitting in a room hearing this constantly.
I think it was more the fact that I would have to, so like I'd have to sit there and tell a story, and I'd say like, oh, I'd come in from being out with my mates and she'd start shouting at me, and then she'd start hitting me. I'd say, oh, I was backed into a corner, and then I pushed her off, and then I'd have to talk about why I shouldn't have pushed her off me, and how that was really wrong of me, that I shouldn't have done that, and that I'm a bad man, and you know, that sort of thing. Because you had to have stories to tell, to reflect on, and I didn't. Those were the only ones that I had, and I don't know if it like. It wasn't. I don't think it really bothered me what the other people were saying that much, but I think it just made me feel like because I had to be there with them. I mean, like some of them people that I went there with are like in jail for horrendous domestic violence offences now, because I've seen their names come up in the paper since then. But it was something I had to do, and it caused a lot of problems at the time. But when I think like now, I did what I had to do to be able to get custody of my daughter.
And just to mention what it feels like with PTSD, did you know this was happening? Was it just sort of, the anxiety just kick in straight away? Was anything triggering straight away? What was the...
I think because I was learning about it at uni at the time, I was able to recognise what was happening. And I noticed them things a lot where like, I'd be really jumpy all the time. Like someone, if you were out shopping and someone, you know, sees you and they give you a tap on the shoulder, I'd be like jumping out my skin. And like the flashbacks and stuff, and just like easily easily angered probably was one of the biggest problems I had, was that I just couldn't tolerate any sort of disagreement with anyone. Would send me up the wall, and I would just really like I'd become very upset and very like I thought everything was going to turn into an abusive situation, and I wouldn't know what to do, and I'd just storm out of the house, and I would slam doors and shout, and I wasn't very nice to be around, really.
So did you feel like there was an injustice as well? Like,
yeah, definitely. And injustice is something I've always struggled with. I think it's common with people with autism that I can't tolerate any sort of injustice, even if I see someone else having an injustice done to them. And I do it all the time. I'm always inboxing people on Instagram and Facebook, so-and-so shouldn't have done this competition because they've won this, and that should mean that they have to compete against at a high level, and just like daft shit like that. But yeah, there was definitely always a sense of injustice in what was going on in that situation with the courts and CAFCAS. And
well, it's because of what you've been through. Yeah. You know, and you're going to look out to the world, go, well, why is this happening? Why is that happening?
Yeah, and I think there was times where it drove me to a point where I felt like people were out to get me, because I was trying to go on holiday to America at the time. I struggled to get a visa. I was struggling to register with the NMC as a nurse because I've also got a drink driving conviction. and that was from getting in the car to drive away from an abusive situation, and she phoned the police on me. And I shouldn't have got in the car, should have ran, but it is what it is. So all these things were happening, and I became really convinced that there was like a conspiracy against me. And that was part of the PTSD, I think, because I just had all that like feeling of injustice. Why is this happening to me? Everyone's after me. It's not fair. I'm being targeted, which I wasn't. It was just lots of coincidences at the same time of where things were hard and I couldn't go up.
Well, you're trying to do the right thing, but everything's getting thrown back in your face all the time.
Yeah.
It's hard to deal with that.
Yeah. And it was all, well, I was going to say all easily dealt with. It wasn't really easily dealt with. The hoops I had to jump through to get registered with the NMC, and the hoops I had to jump through to get a visa to go to America and stuff were like quite, it caused a lot of problems. And most of it was because of the fact that I'd been in an abusive relationship where I was the victim.
So how have you worked on yourself? How have you managed your mental health? And has this led, has it kind of come full circle because you've trained now as a mental health nurse?
I've tried a lot of medications, and I don't really think any of them really did anything for me. I've had a lot of psychological therapy, a lot of cycle after cycle of cognitive behavioural therapy, which I don't think really worked very well. But then I had a therapy called EMDR. I don't know if you've heard of it before. It's a therapy that they invented it for ex-servicemen, which worked on those trauma situations of the hypervigilance and stuff like that, and it changed my life, honestly. Like, I only needed, I think it was 6 or 7 sessions. Some people have it ongoing for like a year to be able to get to the bottom of their problems, but literally in that space of time, all the anxiety pretty much went away. The hypervigilance went away. I can't even really think about them, like them situations now. They don't feel like a real memory anymore. It feels like I have to force myself to remember them if I want to, but they were like really distinctive in my mind before, and still felt like really scary to think about the way that like I was being cornered and hit, and like the physical abuse. It's like, it doesn't bother me anymore.
So that's the thing that helped you.
Yeah, the EMDR was life-changing. It was incredible.
And are you doing other things on top of that? I mean,
I think that
getting into fitness and strongman and stuff like that. But when did that kind of come about?
So I'd started going to the gym while I was in the abusive relationship, but and I did start. I experimented a bit with steroids then as well, which probably wasn't a very good idea at the time. And I did talk about doing strongman then, and she was very against it. So that was another one of the changes I made once I was out of that relationship. I went, oh, I'm going to do a strongman competition. And I entered Newcastle's Strongest Man in 2015. So that was a year after my daughter was born. And I definitely think like the structure of training, once I realised like how to get myself better, was with, you know, like progressive overload and structuring my training and tracking my best lifts, and that was like a really big like support to me to use that, and I mean it still is now. It becomes like I said, I can get obsessed with it, and it can become almost like toxic, the way that you don't want to miss a session. And there was definitely times where I would like avoid social events because I would think like I don't want to go out there because I'll miss a session, and then I might be hungover for my session the next day if I have a drink, and you would like avoid social events because of it. So it has been there's been times where it's got in the way of things, and it's probably been good in the last year to kind of relax that a little bit and let myself be a bit more social than I was.
Do you find you've got to really try hard to do that as well, like let go of things?
Oh yeah, I can't let go of things. And I think that's part of the autism. Like there's probably grudges that I still hold from when I was a kid. I try not to let them affect me, but it's hard really to ever let go of something where I feel like someone's done wrong to me. Sounds a bit sinister, doesn't it?
So you still have those feelings, yeah?
Yeah, like the injustice.
Yeah. Do you think that'll ever go, or do you think that's just...
I don't think it's not that the feeling of injustice will ever go, or I don't want to call it a grudge, because I'm not like trying to get my own back on people or things like that, but it's just not letting it affect you, the changes, isn't it?
Yeah, so you don't have to ruin 2 days of your life because somebody cut you up in traffic, you know?
Yeah. Or like I probably would have argued with people more in the past and sent messages about things where I felt like people had done wrong and stuff, and I can stop myself doing that a bit more now.
So where are you now, Andy? Where's your mindset now? And I want to lead into the health as well with how you are.
Yeah, so the health problems have changed things quite a lot. So I got last September I got really ill really quickly. I thought I had COVID. I was having like joint pain, swelling of my legs, difficulty breathing, like a hacking cough that went on for it went on. I was on holiday at the time when it started, and I thought it was like either COVID or that I had a blood clot from the flight. I was getting treatment for COVID in Mexico. They were giving me like corticosteroids and stuff to try and reduce the inflammation and stuff, and it just didn't go away. And when I got home, I went to the hospital and they did a load of tests and they told me I had heart failure, and I thought it was a joke to begin with. And I think like the doctor that told me did like a nervous laugh as she told me, and I thought like this can't possibly be true. And I had more and more scans and things, and they said like my heart was only functioning at 19%. So the ejection fraction, which is how much your heart pumps out the blood from the ventricle, it should be about 60%. It never pumps out 100% of the blood. Mine was only doing 19%. So when you looked at the scans, it was like instead of pumping like that, it was just like twitching. It was hardly moving at all. So my resting heart rate was nearly 130 to try and compensate for that, to get enough blood around my body to keep things functioning. But obviously that starts to affect like your kidneys and your liver and stuff like that. There was all sorts of things that could have gone wrong.
So you were just on holiday and you kind of fell off.
Yeah, and I'd competed in Sheffield's Strongest Man 4 days before, and I'd done quite well. And then...
And you didn't feel anything in the
nothing.
I
was absolutely fine.
Oh.
Spot on. And then all of a sudden, it was like it come on, like it felt like it came on the flight. I noticed my feet were swollen, that I struggled to put my shoes back on when I was getting off the flight. And I thought, that's weird. And I felt like shit the whole holiday. And then, but I just thought it was like, I really thought I had COVID because it had been going round at the time. And obviously now I know that I didn't. I had heart failure. And it's like, obviously it changed. Someone tells you you've got heart failure, you think you're going to die. And that was my initial thought. You go on Google heart failure, it says you've got 5 to 10 years to live. But that's because most people get diagnosed with it at 65 plus. And that was probably the hardest part of it, was understanding it, because there's nothing out there that tells you about getting heart failure when you're 37 or 38. It's all about, you know, the 99% of people who get it who are elderly, and you don't have any friends who've got it who can tell you how they felt when they got it, because there's no one else around who was that age, and there's certainly no one. Even if you did have a mate who had it, they're probably not competing in strongman. So and that was like, it felt like someone took that away from me, because I remember the first appointment I had with the cardiology nurse. I said to her, "Oh, what about the gym? What can I do?" And she went, "Oh, why don't you just do that 5 days a week?" And I had to stop myself from screaming at her. And I cried in that appointment when she did that, and I don't think she got why. Because people don't, like, well, most people, you say strongman to them, they don't really know what it is. And you have to explain World's Strongest Man and tell them about Jeff Capes and things like that, don't you, for them to even know what you're going on about. And she didn't get it. And they put me with they had like an exercise therapist attached to the team who does cardiac rehab and stuff, and he's a competitive powerlifter. And so he understood what I was doing and the way that I felt. And he basically just said to me, like, just listen to your body. And I went back to the gym and I was like lifting like baby weights. And it did feel like the end of the world at the time. And I felt like there's no point planning for the future because I'm probably going to have a heart attack and die. And I was quite like, you know, everything went super pessimistic for a while.
So what did they say? I mean, heart failure, I'm thinking the same as what you're thinking. My heart's failed.
Yeah.
When's this going to stop?
And they can't really tell you. And this is, it was like the kind of, like the vagueness of it that I really struggled with. And I don't know if everyone would feel the same way or if that's part of the autism. Like, I like to know the ins and outs of everything and how everything works. And what I really struggled with was they did all these tests, CT scans, MRIs, you know, tons and tons of blood tests and urine samples and things like that. And they say like, oh, it's normally caused by high blood pressure, drug use, you know, all these different genetics. And they said the damage that I've got, it doesn't fit with any of them.
So
So they said,
you were going back to cocaine days, were you?
yeah, so and that's what I thought. Yeah, I thought I hammered cocaine for ages. That's probably what's caused it. All right, and like a lot of the time I was competing in strongman, I was using steroids. Most of the time it was like a TRT sort of like. I'd initially gone on it when I was in that suicidal period, and just going on testosterone saved me during that time, because it picked my mood up miles more than any antidepressant ever could have. And I'm not suggesting that anyone should use that as a treatment for their depression. But I did get my bloods checked and mine was low, so I thought I'm going to try it, and it worked. So then obviously I was diagnosed with heart failure and I started thinking, is it that? And I was honest with the cardiologist that I'd used more than just testosterone, but he said, like, we can normally recognise the damage that's done by steroids, it doesn't look like that. We can recognise the damage that's done by cocaine, it doesn't look like that. My blood pressure was normal, so they didn't think it was related to that. My cholesterol was normal, so they don't think it's related to that. There's not much heart-related genetic stuff in my family or nothing that would match up with it. So they just said, we don't know. We don't know what's caused by it. We don't know how it's going to affect you. If it gets worse, I think it gets to 15% function, you get put on the heart transplant list. They started talking about putting a defib in my chest. But fortunately, the treatment started working pretty quick. So like I'm on a lot of medication now. And the side effects of the medication were almost as bad as the heart failure itself to begin with. So I'm on, like, they put me on tablets to bring my heart rate down, but that brought my blood pressure down, which was normal to begin with. So I was in hypotension, and I was like, try to lift anything in the gym, I'd nearly pass out. And I remember, like, I'd lifted up like the empty log one day in Steel City Gym in Borough, and I nearly passed out under the empty log, which is like 50 kilos. And Jenny Todd was in there, and I said to her, like, oh, I don't know how the fuck I'm going to cope with this. Because I can't lift anything. Yeah, if you can't put anything over your head, you can't do strongman. But I mean, it's come back now. I mean, I'm back to on certain lifts nearly as strong as I was before, but I couldn't see that that would be the case when I was diagnosed, because no one could tell me, because no one really had been in this situation that I was in. They had someone under the team that said, oh, there's someone who's a competitive rower, and they've been able to go back to rowing, and they said they were going to put me in contact with them, because they said, like, you know, that understanding with someone else who's competed in a sport and got back to it and stuff, that might help you. But they never give me the contact details for them, no matter how many times I asked. So I was just like banging my head against the wall, like, what support is there? And I said, like, is there some sort of psychological support for people that are going through this? There was nothing. I went through my workplace. I work in a mental health trust. There was nothing to support me through my work with it either. I went to my doctor. They couldn't really suggest anything apart from going on the long waiting lists that are with the psychological therapy services that everyone can access for just general mental health problems.
So you're on the inside and you still can't find any solution?
No. So I just talked to people, but I mean, I internalised a lot of it, because you go to talk to your friends about it and they don't really get it. You kind of need someone to talk to who's in that situation. And there was like, a British Heart Foundation said they had a support group, but that I'd have been by far the youngest person in it. And that put me off entirely even bothering, because I just thought that, like, they're not going to get it in the same way as what I'm experiencing. And then I don't want to go there and feel like, have anyone else feel that I'm minimising their experience by saying that I don't think that, like, in my mind, I was affected by it miles worse than anyone else is, which I know now that I wasn't, and that in the long term I'm not, because I'm fine.
So so now is it sort of manageable? Are you kind of on the medication? Are you back to where you should be? Or?
So my heart function's improved it's gone up to 30% now. So that, like, it's like a 50% improvement on what it was. It could keep improving, but day to day, it doesn't affect me loads. Like, I get out of breath easier than I ever did, which it's hard to address because you can't push yourself with cardio, because as soon as you start trying to do it, it's a bit like having asthma. So your chest starts getting tight, you get really out of breath really easily, and then you just get knackered straight away. So it's quite hard to address that. I've gained loads of weight because of the tablets that I'm on. I've always struggled with my weight anyway, and my diet's not great, but it's like I'm just piling it on at the moment because of the tablets that I'm on. So that's my next thing's going to be to try and put a stop to that.
So you're managing to train though, and if you figured out a way to train, are you happy with where you are with training?
Yeah, so I've got to kind of, play it by ear a bit more than what I did before. I couldn't set myself a plan and say I'm going to deadlift 310 kilos today, because sometimes I'll go in the gym and I couldn't get close to that. So you've just got to say, I'm going to do a heavy single or a heavy double, and then I'm going to do my back off sets as a percentage of that, so that you're working off what your body's capable of on that day. And you've got to accept that sometimes you'll go and you just can't do anything.
Is that hard?
Yeah. I've got a bit more used to it than I was, but I've gone today and I can't hardly do anything. And I don't know, I just felt weak today. Not particularly like any of the symptoms I normally get, like my breathing's been all right and stuff, but I just went in and maybe I've overdone it the last couple of days, and you just don't recover as good as what you used to. Some of that's getting old as well, though, isn't it?
But it seems like your outlook, you're taking a very sensible approach to everything as well, and you've been through quite a lot. Because a lot of people will be like, "Oh, this is just something else." Did you ever think like that? It's another thing.
Oh, definitely. And I think I went into that mindset again of, why is it always me? Like, I didn't think of it in the same way as where I thought there was like a conspiracy of people out to get me or something like that, because it was such a random thing to happen. But it was like, I just can't fucking ever have things go right for a while.
Did that throw you off the mental health wagon a little bit? Does it kind of give you a little bit of a knock?
Only quite briefly, but like I had a few friends who were really supportive and talked to me about what was going on, and I took some time off work. Obviously, I physically couldn't go to work to begin with, but I maybe took more time off to try and take care of my mind before I went back. And it was hard to come to terms with, but I definitely don't think that it affected me anywhere near as much as it might have done in years before, where I didn't have the level of insight as what I do now.
And obviously the therapy that you've done, EMDR, was that help with the suicidal kind of thoughts and stuff like that?
They haven't been there for a long time, really, and I think that that's never really come about as part of this. It's just more been a thought of, I think I'm going to die. Not that I want to die. It's a worry that you're going to, which is the opposite of a suicidal thought, really, isn't it? Because if you were suicidal, you wouldn't worry that you're going to die. You'd want to. So it's more like I'm thinking, oh shit, what can I do? Because this heart condition's going to kill me.
Yeah, because now you don't want to die, do you?
No.
You've got something to live for as well. And you're in a good place, it seems.
Yeah, and I've got a really supportive partner now who I don't like. She tries to get what I'm feeling, but again, I don't think in my mind, no one really gets what I'm feeling, because they can't experience it how I'm experiencing it. But I mean, I've gone back to strongman now. I've competed twice in the last 2 months. I haven't done very well, but it's just, in my mind now, if I stop, it's because I choose to stop, not because heart failure stopped me, and I can deal with that better.
Yeah, so you can accept you're not going to do well, but you just want to keep doing it.
Yeah, because I've never done it to win. I've always done it to make friends and to enjoy it, and to structure my training around. And it felt like, really, if someone was saying you can't do strongman because you've got heart failure, that's not fair for someone to tell me that. But now if I say I'm not going to do strongman because I don't enjoy it anymore, or because I'm getting old and shit, then I don't mind that as much. I can deal with that.
So one final thing, Andy, is just a message out there, which we do after every episode. Just, it could help somebody who might be in a similar situation, been through a similar situation. I don't want to really force you to jump back on the abuse side of things, but I think that message in itself might help somebody out there, because it's quite rare, I think.
Yeah, I don't think there's many people that are prepared to talk about being a victim of domestic abuse as a man. But I mean, it's not uncommon. And I think if you talk to people about it in a sensible way, people that know you and people who love you, that people will try to understand and people will try to help you. And there's a way out and things will get better.
anything else from your experiences in life that you want to pass on to somebody else out there? Because you've been through quite a bit of stuff there, Andy.
Yeah, and I think it's always got to be that you've got to ride that wave, haven't you? And that eventually, you know, calmer seas will come along and things will start to get better. You've just got to try and take a structured approach to things, and don't bury your head in the sand. Talk to someone about it. Do some research and see what's out there that can help you, and maybe try something a bit unconventional. Try and change your way of thinking and do some. If the conventional way of treating something's not working, try something different.